here's a scenario for you. You're taking care of a child's money. So it's not your money, but you can validly do the deal. But also, you're taking care of someone else's money, like you work for someone. He has merchandise. So he has what the child needs. You have access to both of them. Really, you could just do switcheroo. Can you do that? You cannot do that. Since one cannot sell to himself, if the guardian sells for another what his ward needs, the owner must first accept dealing with the money of a child. Yani, that child's guardian who wants some of what his boss has, he has to let his boss know that that's the money of a child. So he has to accept dealing with that. Then, since one cannot sell to himself, if the guardian sells for another what his ward needs, the owner must first accept dealing with the money of a child. Then the guardian authorizes someone to buy on behalf of the child and sells to him here. Then the guardian authorizes someone to buy on behalf of the child and sells to him. Why? Because he's actually doing the deal for his boss to sell to the child. Who's selling to the child? It's the boss's merchandise going to the side of the child. Then who's going to accept for the child? Can't be the same one who's selling it. So then the guardian authorizes someone to buy on behalf of the child. He authorizes someone else and says, you accept this on behalf of the child. Mm-hmm. MashaAllah. That's an interesting case there. Because he's authorized and he can authorize someone there. But generally, we don't say the authorized one can authorize. The authorized one, as a general rule of thumb, does not authorize. Not in Shafi'i school. But this one here is a wali. That's different from someone that you told him what to do. So that's an interesting case there. He may also return his ward's wife to the marriage. He may return his ward's wife to the marriage. Can anyone see that scenario? Or do you remember what it is? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like, his ward is crazy. But when he was sane, he divorced his wife. So she went into her iddah, and it's a returnable iddah. So he went crazy and became under a wali. Now this wali can return his ward's wife to the marriage. Yes. A man, so when we say you're wali of a crazy person yani includes being pubescent. So you might be his wali. So he was sane and he had a wife. And then he divorced her with the revocable divorce. And then he went insane and became under a wali, like a child. So then this wali can bring his wife back, reinstate that one. He can say the statement on his behalf, yani. No. The slave must return what he took, if he took something. And whatever perishes becomes a debt on him sought after emancipation. The owner is not forced to sell the slave to pay because the other was not forced to deal with the slave. The owner is not forced to sell the slave to pay because the other was not forced to deal with the slave. Yes.
Sheikh,
Nah.
for the slave, in the case that the perishable item was destroyed and he was never freed and died, is this situation here after that he would not be punished because he was not able to fulfill that, um, or to replace what was lost due to him?
Well, it was haram for him to deal.
Okay.
He transgressed.
Okay.
No. MashaAllah. The owner is not forced to sell the slave to pay because the other was not forced to deal with the slave. So then you know who you're dealing with. Likewise, if the slave destroys property, the penalty is on the slave, not the owner. Like a child, not the parent. However, the owner cannot sell that slave without permission of the victim, unless he pays the fine. Subhanallah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense there. MashaAllah. Let's read that again. However, the owner cannot sell that slave without permission of the victim, unless he pays the fine. Something comes on the owner, Yani. Yani, it makes sense that makes sense because his presence, the owner's presence, interferes with the person's ability to get his right from that slave who wronged him. Whoever sells what he neither owns nor has authority over it. So whenever you're dealing with someone, that one has to be one of two. Very simple equation. You own it or you're authorized. If you're neither of those, then why am I talking to you? So if someone sells what he doesn't own and he's not authorized, then the sale is invalid. Never became valid. It's not pending. Even if the owner approves later, because it's not pending, it's just invalid, according to the stronger saying. A weaker saying being that the owner could approve. And it's permissible to take by that saying. It is permissible to take by that saying. The woman has control over all her properties, like the one who was dangerously ill but then recovered. He has control over all of his properties. He was dangerously ill and then he recovered. He's not restricted in any of his money, and like that, the woman is not restricted, yani, unless she has a restriction. She has control over her whatever she's not restricted from. She can do all her deals and everything, and she owns all of her stuff. Like the one who was dangerously ill but then recovered, his restriction stops. Yani, when he was dangerously ill, he became restricted. He didn't have control over all of his property. You know that already, right? For the right of the heirs if he dies. Her marriage extends no authority to her husband in her money. And what does money mean? What does money mean? Her assets. Okay. Or anything that has monetary value, which is her assets. Nor does she gain control over his property. That's his. That's very easy. That's the kuffar. I don't know why did they even put themselves into that headache there. How do they even think that's a good idea? Or where did they get it from? Mm. But she has a right to some of his money in the form of spousal support. It's like he owes her something. He has to give her something. He has to do something for her. But she doesn't control his money. It is valid for a child to inherit. So that's a valid deal there, which means that money becomes his money. And he can't spend it until he reaches puberty. And to acquire a stick or a fish or anything like that, or a golden nugget, a diamond from a cavern, if he got it, it's his. And to intend to worship, if the child reached mental discerning, then this valid to intend to worship. Some of the scholars counted that as a type of aqd. Like, I don't know if you can translate that as deal there. It's aqd. According to Imam Ahmad, the guardian can give permission to the discerning child to deal. That's different from Ash-Shafi'i. According to Ash-Shafi'i, the guardian give, cannot authorize the child to deal, and the child is restricted until puberty. So here, this is an important lesson about the meaning of selling. Because what if you had the child at the cash register? At the cash register. What if you had the child at the cash register? Uh, and you were there, and someone comes, and just is right there, changing with the child, taking money and giving money and taking some product and leaving, etc. While you're there, though. So what's that? That's dealing with you there. You're watching. You're doing the deal. So here, to determine his maturity in dealing, the trader tests his child in bargaining without the child finalizing the contract. That's you. The farmer tests him with farming. The girl is tested with management of the house, etc. If he becomes pubescent while religiously mature, and some said fiscally mature, and is not foolish with his money, his restriction is lifted without a judge once he reaches puberty. Just automatically. Yani, he prays, he's a good kid. Khalas, give him his money. And the male can marry without a guardian at that point there. The bankrupt can sell described items and take loans. Yani, the one who's barred, the bankrupt one who's barred. Who's bankrupt? What does it mean to be bankrupt? What does it mean to be bankrupt? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It means your debts are more than your assets. But you won't be restricted unless a Muslim judge restricted you. So when we talk about the bankrupt one here, we mean the one who's restricted by the judge. The bankrupt can sell described items and take loans. Sell a described item. As opposed to what? What's contrary to a described item? What's contrary to a described item? What's your other option? Yes, to see the item. Or in other words, a specific item. Described item versus specific item. Very important. That one is a gun on your hip. So what's the difference? Described items, there's more restriction here. Yani, described item basically means you don't have it. Described item basically means delivery. So when you're talking delivery, then you're talking about not having the product present. So what's the case here? If you don't have the product present, what's your case? What can you do here? Maybe you already saw it. If you already saw it, you just don't have it right there, then that's fine, as long as it wasn't long enough to change. As long as that wasn't long enough ago for it to change, you don't have to see it again. And you can get your delivery. It's like you bought a specific item. You did buy a specific item. So if you didn't see that specific one, then that means you're dealing with something being described to you. So here, this is where a lot of the confusion is. What's permissible and what's not permissible? So you have two cases here. You have a case that they didn't disagree about. That's called salam. Salam, which is that you can sell a described thing that can be very precisely described and it's not mixed with other materials like rice and gold and some things like that. Also, that applies to animals. This type, with its rules, like it can't be transformed by fire. For this type of sale, for this delivery, it can't be something changed by fire. That would include a brick, because that's changed by fire. It can't be something that's mixed with other elements, like what if something was made of rubber and metal and glass and plastic and leather? All of that together was the thing. Can't be like that. So this type, they didn't disagree about it. But usually this is not where the question is. So what about something not like those? Like computers made of pieces and phones and some other things. Cloth, it can work if it can be precisely measured. With cloth, you can do like, if it's not mixed, you can do that. Salam right there, contract. So this one, though, things that are not like that, they don't agree about this. So some said that selling described items is salam, contract. Not, and whatever doesn't apply to the salam, you can't do it. Like cheese, like a platter, a food platter, cooked with chicken and rice and salad. So some said you can buy described items, though not salam. Then it still needs to be described exactly in such a way that you're not ignorant about it. So the bankrupt can sell described items. That means he's not dealing with his physical money and take loans. A blasphemer can establish an inalienable endowment. He can make a waqf. It would be valid. He also can get married, with not including the apostate. That's apostate means here, even if he apostatized from his original religion to another religion of blasphemy, then he's an apostate. They can't get married. And the blind can authorize what he cannot manage due to blindness. The blind can authorize what he cannot manage due to blindness. Like what? What's something he can't manage due to blindness? Should be a very obvious answer. His money. Let's not say his money like that because that's so broad. A sale. So the blind one must authorize someone to do the sale for him. Maybe I told you about one of our brothers. When I was in Lebanon, he was blind. I don't think he was absolutely blind, but blind enough. So he had to authorize people to do a sale for him. So he would go order from the desk and it will just stand there. And his order will be made, and then someone will come and say, "Excuse me, brother, can I authorize you to buy this for me? This is my money here." And then you will say, "Yes." And then you do it for him, and he takes it and goes, "MashaAllah."